I need you to imagine with me for a moment. Imagine that you are on the top of a high mountain peak. The sun is shining down on you, streaking the blue sky with orange and pink hues. Imagine it. Picture looking out on this magnificent view out to the horizon. Imagine the wind gently breezing on your face. A hawk soars by, and it's at your eye level. You have worked hard and sacrificed a lot to get to the top of this peak, to have this experience, to stand in this privileged place where so few get to stand. You breathe, you take it all in. Imagine looking out on that view and your heart is gladly pumping in your chest and your soul is flying high. And then suddenly, you can't help but notice how far down the ground is. You're suddenly filled with fear. You know that a tiny misstep, you know that a slight mistake might send you flying all the way down this mountain. You suddenly feel very precarious, and you know how easily it can all fall apart. You're suddenly filled with dread that you will fall and fall. You will be brought low until you hit rock bottom. We gather here every week. And every week we talk about the stories in our scriptures. We talk about Jesus and his followers. We talk about the miraculous things they did. And every week we leave our ordinary lives for about an hour to try to figure out, what is God calling me to do in this moment in my life? And very often we leave here at the end of the hour and we hopefully feel refilled, replenished in some way. And then a week goes by, and a week goes by, and a week goes by. And all along the way, we wonder, what does it look like for God to show up in our lives? Why don't things seem to change more quickly? Well, in the season of Lent, we have a story that helps guide us through this question. It helps guide us through the question of, if God is so good and I am so blessed, then why am I not seeing more transformation in my life? The story of Jesus' trials in the desert is the story that we need to really internalize to know how this is supposed to work, how it feels and what it looks like to answer God's call. And in the end, it's almost never about what we do. It's almost never about what actions we take or the ones that we don't take. It's almost always about understanding ourselves and getting a clear look at what we face in the world. Jesus heard himself called beloved Son of God. He immediately went into the desert, where he was approached after 40 days of hunger by the tempter. This is what it says in the book of Matthew, the tempter. The tempter comes to him and suggests, if you are the Son of God, you would be able to turn these stones into loaves of bread. And Jesus rejects that identity. Jesus refuses to be defined by what he can do. He chooses to be defined by who he is. I don't hunger for bread alone. I hunger for every word that comes from the mouth of God. Now, in the book of Matthew, for the second trial, it says the devil The devil then took Jesus atop the pinnacle, the highest point of the temple in the holy city of Jerusalem. And from that point, the devil said to Jesus, "Throw yourself down. If you are truly the Son of God, then God will send angels to catch you. For it is written in your Bible that God will not allow you to dash your foot against a stone." And Jesus says, excuse me, Jesus says to the devil, "It is also written, do not test the Lord your God." So Jesus is high up on a pinnacle. He's high up top. And the devil says, "Throw yourself down." Jesus has a choice to either plummet potentially to his death, hoping that God may save him, or to cling to this temple, to cling to this holy site that he knows and that he trusts, and never let go of it for the rest of his life for fear of falling, of being brought low, of hitting rock bottom. You know, this story is told in 3 of the 4 Gospels in our Bible. It's told 3 different times in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And in Mark and Luke, so these are called the Synoptic Gospels. Synoptic Gospels. If we were going to take the Greek out of those words, all it means is similar view of the good news. So gospel means good news. This is the good news of God. And these 3 writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they have similar views of this good news. And so their stories all kind of match one another to one degree or another. The good news revealed to us by Jesus Christ is that God is loving, God is powerful, God is involved in human life, and God has power over even death itself. This is the good news revealed to us by Jesus. Now, Mark and Luke, they tell that story, and this story in particular, the story of Jesus' temptations, they tell that story in a binary way. They tell that story like it's a battle between good and evil. There's a clearly defined good, there's a clearly defined evil. In this corner you have, weighing in at, 105 pounds, Jesus of Nazareth. In this corner you have Satan, the embodiment of all evil. And they tell this story as if it is a battle, as if there is a good side and a bad side, and they are vying for the ultimate supreme winning of all humanity in all time. Matthew doesn't tell the story that way. In Matthew, we don't see the spiritual journey as a matter of good versus evil, right versus wrong. We see it as an evolution in how we live our lives, an evolution in our thinking. It invites us to ask deeper questions, and then deeper questions under that, and deeper questions under that. And it does that in a few different ways. One of them is by naming this character. It's the same character throughout the entire story. It's the devil. But according to Matthew, and in Matthew alone, in the first trial, he is named Tempter. He's just there to offer little suggestions, to see if he can tempt Jesus from forgetting who he is and living life in a different way. But in the second trial, he's not called the tempter, he's called devil. And the Hebrew word for devil, the ancient Jewish understanding of who the devil is, it means stumbling block. It means obstacle. It means the thing that you trip over in the road, the thing that makes you fall, the thing that holds you up and hurts your foot. The way Matthew tells the story, if we are trying to figure out what it means to live as God's beloved in the world, we don't need to worry about being good and winning the battle over evil. We need to be aware that there will be temptations to think of ourselves as something other than God's beloved. And if we're not tempted from the path, then we need to be reminded that there will at times be obstacles, stumbling blocks, things that get in our way and prevent us from going further down the path. So when Jesus finds himself standing atop the highest, most holy city in the most holy, or the most holy site in the most holy of cities, looking down at the earth below, the devil says to him, "Throw yourself down, and if you are the Son of God, he'll send angels to catch you." Your Bible says God would never allow you to trip over a stone, said the stumbling block. What Jesus faces in this second trial is a very familiar human obstacle: fear. Fear of failure, fear of falling, afraid to trip, afraid to stumble down and down and down, a fear of everything collapsing and falling apart and hitting rock bottom. How do we move past this obstacle? How do we move beyond our fear? Jesus shows us in his example. We name it for what it is. He calls a stumbling block a stumbling block. When Jesus sees that he is talking with the devil, he is no longer stuck between clinging for safety on the side of this temple or plummeting to his death far below. He names it for what it is: a false choice. And he says, "It's written that you don't test my God." The word privilege has become a ubiquitous buzzword in our culture. We hear on a regular basis about white privilege, the concept that those of us with white skin enjoy different freedom and different rights in America than people with not white skin. We hear about male privilege, how men have certain rights and opportunities that many women do not. But there's many different kinds of privilege. The privilege of not having to defend your right to love or marry who you want. The privilege to practice your religion as you would like without physical or political harm. The privilege to not worry about having enough money to buy what you need. The privilege of living in a body that can move without assistance, or a body that conforms to our society's gender norms. The privilege of not having to worry about what we throw away or what happens to it, because it doesn't affect our daily life. It doesn't lead to the destruction of our immediate environment. Everyone in this room is in some position of privilege. But that's kind of where our cultural conversation about privilege gets stuck. That's kind of where we have stopped with the conversation right now. We get caught up in a debate about who is privileged and who is not. It becomes a competition to see who can be saddled with the most blame for the ills of the world and who is affected most by those ills. It gets into a lot of finger pointing and a lot of labeling and a lot of naming. And friends, that's a stumbling block. That is something we trip over that prevents us from taking the next step, where we say together, we are all God's beloved children, and we want to shape our lives and our world so that everyone gets to live as God's beloved children. What we can name here, in this room, in the company of people who love us and sitting before our steadfast God, what we can name is the very word privilege is terrifying. Because privileges can be taken away. If our lives are based on privilege, as so many often remind us, then the slightest misstep, the smallest mistake, could send us tumbling from our highest height, from our positions of privilege, down to the lowest lows until we hit rock bottom. Jesus shows us the only way to move past this fear is to not worry about maintaining our position, but using where we are to serve others, to bring the good news of a God of love and justice to those who need it most. A few minutes ago, I asked you to imagine yourself on top of the mountain. Well, now I'm going to invite you to imagine yourself at rock bottom. Imagine the worst has happened. Everything you counted on in your life, everything you clung to for security has been removed. It has fallen to pieces. It's fallen apart, and you have hit rock bottom. Imagine opening your eyes and looking around. What do you see? Bajada. That's what you see. That's the word for it. Bajada. It's a Spanish word, but it's applied to geography. It's a word that refers to the base of a mountain range. It's the area where all of the streams and all of the rainfall, all the water from the mountains have coalesced at the base of the mountain to provide an environment fit for sustaining life. This is the area where plants start to grow. This is the area where animals come to drink water, and small animals eat the plants, and they build homes in other plants. This is the area where larger animals come in to find smaller animals to eat for food. It's in the Bajada that life flourishes. We look to the mountains. We can't take our eyes off of them. We dream of going to the highest peaks and climbing the highest heights. We ignore entirely the little shrubs and the dirty rocks and the place at the base of the mountain that isn't all that interesting to look at. And that's exactly where life flourishes. The Bajada, beneath, at rock bottom. It's at that place that Jesus was able to place his feet on solid ground and continue walking his journey. And it's in that place that we are called to be. We fear falling from great heights. We fear life as we know it falling apart. But it's only in La Bajada where we can live as God calls us to live together. It's only in that space where we encounter life in all of its complexity and all its messiness and all its uncertainty. And we can live vibrantly with the rest of creation. Everyone needs mountaintop experiences. Everyone needs to know that they are loved, that they are God's blessed child, but we're never called to stay there. The faith journey always leads us down the mountain to the Bajada. We need not fear it. We need not protect ourselves from it, because our God cannot be tested, and Jesus has already paved the way for us. Thanks be to God.